I'm Debra Valencia, and I'm a designer. I was with the Sussman Prasia office for 12 years, so it was, of course, a very influential part of my career.
All right. Do you want to talk about how you first became involved in the '84 Olympics project?
Well, I was already working at Sussman Prasia. I started there in 1981. I was right out of college at that point, and we, at first we heard about the Olympics because we knew Robert Miles Runyon was working on the logo, and we knew that Keith Bright's office was working on pictograms, and I don't know all the details of how we got the job necessarily, since I was a junior designer at the time, but being a small office of just 5 or 6 people, I certainly knew that it was in the possibility that we might be working on it. So there was already, let's just say I'd only been there for maybe 6 or 8 months at this point. It was already 1982, and we heard rumors about, they're putting together teams, which would be an architect's office with a graphic design firm, and they would have teams that would do each venue. And so I don't know who got in contact with who first, but we ended up on a team with the Jurdy Partnership. So they were the architect. And our first assignment was to do the Olympic Village at UCLA. So that was the only part we were working on. And so my understanding at that time was that each team had a venue. So there were, I believe, 23 athletic venues and 3 villages, Olympic villages. This is where the athletes would actually live. So it was actually a fun, assignment. And so we were working on concepts for that. And we came up with the look that became known as the look of the Olympics, festive federalism, or the look. And so how it had come about is that the Jurdy Partnership, John Jurdy specifically, and David Meckel, they had the concept to do as much of the signage and the decorations, for lack of a better word, three-dimensional design, with temporary materials, because at this point it's already 2 years from the Olympics. Most of the other Olympics in other countries that we had studied, Montreal, Mexico, and other preceding ones, what was the one in Germany? Anyway, the ones that we thought were really well designed, they had at least 6 years, if not more, to design those. The teams were brought on that early, and that's why they were able to create really grand and more permanent types of, structures, new buildings, new entryways, remodeling of buildings, and all that. And here we are, only 2 years out, and they said it's just going to be logistically impossible to do those types of the structures that are needed. It's just I believe that from the Olympic Committee standpoint, they were trying to get, for the first time, their concept was not to go in debt for the city, but to actually get sponsor money to pay for everything. And so that's why there was kind of a delay, I believe. It wasn't necessarily mismanagement, but I think that they were trying to approach it from a more fiscally responsible way and a more profitable way, with the 2 particular people that were leading it were, we want to do this thing, but we don't want the city to be hundreds of millions of dollars in debt type of thing. So it delayed the whole getting going of the design. So Jurdy Partnership had this idea of temporary materials, and so they already had the idea of the scaffolding and the sonotubes and the tents and various other, all the other. If you look at the style guide, it'll have pictures of these cardboard tubes and the tents, the temporary structures, the scaffolding. So that was already in kind of concept form. In fact, I remember Jurdy had little 3x5 index cards with sketches of all these little architectural elements. But they were just plain. They didn't have any kind of color or graphics or signage on them. And so when we got the assignment to the Olympic Village, Deborah had, we were kind of drawing on top of Dirty's sketches, like what can we do with these things? And she had the idea of using colors that were derivative of, that were influenced by Mexico and Japan and all the Asian countries, like everything she called the Pacific Rim. So bringing in those bright colors and also contrasting the red, white, and blue of the Stars and Stripes logo. So so the idea was to contrast the red, white, and blue and kind of the colors of the flags. And so we came up with this color palette of 11 colors. I should just leave this out because it's such a good tool. We had the color palette of 11 colors. And I remember we had these shiny gloss papers. So this is pre-computer. We did everything by hand. So everything was cut out of paper. We either did cut paper mock-ups or we also simulated them with colored pencils. But the shiny colored paper was really key in coming up with what all our models and our mock-ups looked like. So we literally cut strips of paper out and stars and little squares and circles and everything, and we started playing with how we could decorate these tents and how we could make the signage kind of pop out, contrasting the normal landscape. So if you're driving down the road and you see this hot pink sign or hot, bright aqua sign, lime green, that kind of thing, that it would really stand out as a symbol of, oh, that's an Olympic, there's the directions, or here's the entrance. So it was intentional that it was very, very bright and very exciting, and also these are colors that would not last in the environment. You can't put anything out that's hot pink or those kind of colors. They're not going to last in reality. So we knew that, and that's why they're not normally colors that you would see. But since they only had to be up for 8 to 12 weeks, we could afford to do something temporary like that.
Forgive the outsider, but LAX with the Pillars of Light, was that?
No, that was actually designed by a design firm that actually isn't in existence now, but it was only done maybe about 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any connection with that. I think that was just more that the physical area lent itself to something that was column-like.
Mm-hmm. Did this, the LA design from '84, did that kind of influence the look of LA, do you feel?
Oh, I do, because it actually was interesting that, so what happened was, I guess it was like late '82, and David Meckel would be very helpful in these exact dates, and exact sequence of events, but late '82, we'd already done models and mock-ups and concepts and presentations for the Olympic Village. And then at that time, the clock was ticking, and everybody was panicking and saying, we're not going to get done in time, they're not approving things quick enough, and, there's too many teams. And so I believe John Dirty and Debra Sussman went into the Olympic Committee and said, we have a look already that you like, and it would behoove you and be more organized if you just let us be the lead, and then we come up with a style guide and then let all the teams continue, but with one look. Because in the meantime, we were also getting wind and seeing some of the other teams' work. And not that it was necessarily bad, but it's just like every venue was different, and there was no cohesive color palette, there was no cohesive font, there was no cohesive signage, so everybody was doing their own thing. One would be just like all gray and black and like baby blue or something, like very, very minimalist. And then we had our loud colors, and I don't remember what some of the other ones looked like, but they had reputable companies working on everything, but it just wasn't organized. It just wasn't coordinated very well. And so we also got the task of doing the 1983. I don't know what they call them, but it was like preliminary. I guess they're preliminary events. So what happened was out at Lake Casitas, they had they were planning to do these 1983 kind of trial run types of things. So we actually designed, like all the photographs you see in the style guide, they're all from actually 1983, because this style guide was done a year ahead of time. So, so we got to test out all of our ideas. And so in these pictures, you can actually see the backdrops, the stages, the entryways, the scaffolding designs. And then in late '83, just immediately following, almost simultaneous with that, we did get the go-ahead to do a style guide and to be in charge of the entire design effort. That would be a collaboration between the Dirty Partnership and Sussman Prasia. And so I personally worked on this style guide, and the idea was this was only going to be distributed to the internal design team and any sponsors, so that they could pick up on any of the elements. They would know what the colors were and what the basic elements were. And we didn't have time to do a hefty style guide. We did just a poster, and then the idea was that I designed it in a way that it could be folded and carried around, because we were working working so quickly and everything. It was literally thought, like, I'm just going to have this, like, on, carry it with me in my bag or whatever. And so that was the idea. So there were only maybe a couple hundred, maybe 500 posters printed at the most. So this is a really rare document.
Do you have a digital copy of it?
I do have a scan of it, yeah. And actually, this is featured in the new exhibit at LACMA. It just opened recently, I believe. Must have been in early September. I went to the opening. It's found in translation.
Mm.
We have that poster, another poster that we did, and sonotubes are in there for design in California from 1915 to 1985. Well, I think it certainly put us on the map. Although LA was certainly on the map before that, but I think it was known for Saul Bass's excellent corporate identities and film titles, and probably April Greiman's new wave graphics of the early 80s. But, I don't think that people in New York took us seriously. I know, because everybody I went to college with went to New York, being from Philadelphia. And I was the only one that went out to LA. So they kind of considered us second-class citizens, let's say, at that point, compared to, let's say, London and New York. But it made us very well known after that. And in fact, our firm grew, Debra Sussman's firm grew from, we had 5 or 6 people when I started in '81. And then we quickly had to staff up, and we had over 50. We had about 60 employees, not including like all the freelance people and everything. So it definitely made our firm very well known worldwide. I mean, they had a couple decades of successful work following that, because we were so well known. We had so much publicity and everything. So I don't know how it affected the other designers per se. I just know it definitely helped Sussman Prasia grow from a small boutique firm to a major international firm, and that lasted for a long, long time.
What did you guys do that nobody else did?
What do you mean?
Like, was there any kind of redefining moments that you guys had that you saw the problem and you redefined it in a different way that hadn't done in design before?
Well, I think that, I think our whole approach to how we did the Olympics was different. It was very on the fly. It was very quick. I know that, in a traditional graphic design firm, like, let's say, Saul Bass and other firms that I knew who did corporate identity and all that. I mean, you would do dozens, if not hundreds, of logo designs, before, with subtle variations, and you would have research, and you would have keywords, and you would have, case studies that documented, well, this is why we're going to do it this way, and this is why it's a good solution, and you would market test things, and I've done all that too on other projects and in other phases of my career, or where it was warranted or it was merited. But in this case, we had no time for anything. It was just like, the concept, we had the papers, we had the sketches, we had models, and we just basically did something once, and it was done. I mean, I know later you're going to ask me specific projects that I worked on, but literally we had to work just so quickly. It was intuitive, basically, and that there wasn't time to go back and modify things. I mean, fortunately, we had people that were just really good at doing that, and I actually really enjoyed that, being able to do something so just kind of free form.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also, I mean, there was outrage actually from some of the design community that they didn't think the colors we were using were dignified. They didn't think, they thought, the concept of bringing in colors from Mexico was crazy, and, using hot pink was just not a dignified color for the Olympics. And but we got go-ahead from the head of the Olympics, so we just ran with it. And, I think it proved to be successful in the end. We didn't want to use the same colors that were already used in all the international flags, and we certainly didn't want to use red, white, and blue. We felt it should contrast that and let the flag colors stand alone. And, again, the temporary nature let us do things that weren't normally done in architectural graphics.
You talked about Mexico and Japan being part of the influence,
In even
inspiration.
India.
Were there where else did you guys
Oh,
go
well,
for-
the other thing Debra brought to the table, she was an extensive world traveler, and also a very good photographer, both her and Paul, but her photographs even went back to when she was a teenager. And so she just had a great eye for things, and so she had photographs that she had personally taken in Mexico, like at marketplaces and during festivals, in India during festivals, and she showed these as concept work. Like they would use, let's say they'd use a bamboo post and they'd have just like streamers, colored streamers. And so we adapted those ideas to our situation. Like we took those ideas and we made them into tree decorations, and we made wind socks and things like that. And the idea of just having bright colors that were solid fabrics, but you just cut them into strips and make a decoration out of it, because it's a festival. This is how different cultures celebrate different holidays and festivities, is with these temporary handmade kinds of decorations, hanging up bunting and fabric, and just like putting up a tent and draping it, or putting decorations into the trees or on the light posts and that kind of thing. So we derived a lot of our ideas from all those festival photographs that she had, and they were from all different parts of the world: India, China, Japan, Mexico, Central America. So it really worked, I think, rather than going I think the tendency for most of the design architects and designers was to do something more formal, thinking, well, this is very prestigious, and this is the United States, and we should do something very prim and proper. But we did kind of the opposite of that, and we had some resistance, but it did go through. And as the time got shorter and shorter and shorter, everything had to be temporary and quick. Just like quick, okay, first sketch, that looks great, move on. I mean, not that we didn't tweak things. I mean, we did hire a lot of new people during that time, and so I had to go from being a junior designer right out of college to being a supervisor of over 25 people, practically overnight. It gave me great management experience, but I was actually very good at managing people and getting them, kind of figuring out who's doing what their talents were, and here's the process, here's what I need you to do, and kind of dividing up the work and getting it all done in a very quick way. So while Debra was out doing all the meetings and presentations, I was usually back at the office, producing a lot of the work.
How hands-on was Deborah when she was providing the kind of overview of what she was looking for? You'd mentioned being autonomous in your ability to design, but when she was out pitching, she must have given you kind of the framework of...
Yes, I mean, that was how Deborah was absolutely brilliant. I mean, she was definitely my most important mentor in my entire career, and we got along really, really well. And a lot of people wouldn't say that. Deborah was tough. She was tough to work for. I mean, there were a lot of people that they were just like oil and water and didn't get along with her, but I got along with her famously. And one of the things that brought us together is that she could make just a little tiny thumbnail sketch of kind of what, like a doodle, basically. She would come to my desk and we would talk, and usually this would be at 7 or 8 at night, because that's when she was really creative. And she would make little sketches on tracing paper, and we would talk about it. And then she would leave and, go have to do whatever she was doing. And then she could come back the next day, and I'd have I'd have all different comps and sketches and lettering, and, I'd have all these different ideas that I'd spun off of just her little thumbnail. And so she just loved that. I mean, we completely got each other. And so, so she definitely inspired. She came up with the concept, and then I would run with it and really develop it into reality. And I was also good all the way through production, so I could, really carry things out. And I was really fast, so we just got along great. But she always was the key person as far as the idea. And it was good that she did those ideas, because it was so different than my training, which was all my teachers were educated in Switzerland. So it was Basel School of Design in Switzerland. And that was like a next generation after the Bauhaus. And so all my training was, everything had to be like minimalist, and you didn't have anything excessive or decorative, and everything was just very clean, and composition and everything was very important. There was no outside influences like ethnic art or historical references or things like that. Everything had to do with just being sparse and modern and minimalist. And so that was a great education, but then Debra just completely turned me upside down, because she's like, oh no, we have to bring in Mexico, or we'd be working on another project, like I want to bring in, German, 18th century, lettering from beer cans, or it depended on what project we were working on, but she always had some kind of historic or ethnic references in her work, because she had traveled so extensively. And so it really taught me a completely different way of designing. So this whole thing with the Mexico and India, festivals and all that, I had never even seen anything like that, but I completely got her idea and ran with it.
So was the culture of Deborah's office something that you saw in other offices in LA, or was so unique to her?
I think it was quite unique. I mean, I think she ran the office in a way, or it was probably very similar to how the Eames office was, even though that was before my time. I knew a lot of people who worked at the Eames office. So Debra worked in the Eames office in the 50s and stayed very close with the Eameses. And then I know people that started there as early, like in the 60s, and were there in the 70s. In fact, David Meckel was there, so you can ask him about that. But she, from what I know about the Eames office, where it was very broad. I mean, they did a lot of things. They did furniture, they did exhibits, they did photography, they did films, they did print graphic design, they did, they really were a big picture. And Sussman Prasia was a lot like that too. I mean, we did furniture design, even though we may not be well known for that, we designed furniture, we designed interiors, we did print, we did logos, we did product design, we did, architectural graphics, which is what we were most well known for. But usually we get a job that was architectural graphics and then convince the client to give us more aspects of the project, because we really did have the in-house talent to do all aspects. She had the background in that, and so we liked being able to do everything from soup to nuts on a job, not just be typecast or pigeonholed to do one aspect of it and then somebody else is doing the print or the identity or things like that.
Did you have an idea of how big the '84 Olympics was going to be? in regards
No,
to-
we had no clue, and I remember even when I was just working on the early parts of it, all my New York friends were so envious. They were like, "Oh, you're so lucky to be working on that. We're so jealous." I mean, they're working on bank identities and very corporate types of projects, and I'm working on the Olympics. And we really didn't know it, because it just happened. It happened little by little over a short period of time. As I mentioned, we were just doing the one village, and then we got to do the test events in '83, and then all of a sudden we're in charge of the whole look, and we're doing the style guide and interfacing with pretty much every team. And so a lot of the designers, we tried to involve as many people as we could, because there was so much work to do. There was plenty of work to do. It's just our mission was just to have it all look consistent across the board, so that the customers, the participants and so on, the athletes as well as the audience, would be able to find their way around LA, being such a big area. I mean, it went all the way from Lake Casitas down to Orange County, or even Santa Barbara down to Orange County. And it was spread out all over the place, because they couldn't really have it in a consolidated area like some other Olympics, because we weren't building special buildings or one hub. It was really going to be spread out all over the place into existing facilities. So imagining that people, I think we figured out there was something like 80 miles of just fencing material, and we had thousands of signs that were going on the freeways and the various streets, and miles and miles and miles of streets with flags, with banners on them, and that type of thing, to identify, okay, this is a main boulevard that's going to end at USC or at UCLA and so on. But people would have to drive, a long way. They might have to go from UCLA for one event and then drive over to USC to another event, and then maybe drive up to Lake Casitas or down to, like El Camino College or something for a different event. So there's going to be these big kind of voids between each venue. So that was a challenge, and part of the other idea of using all these temporary materials, because we had such a huge, immense space to decorate, basically, or to identify where the different venues are.
Can you think of any one moment that stands out for being overly stressful or overly big celebration, or kind of the quintessential moment?
I can't remember anything particular. I mean, I'm sure they came back one day with the news that we were getting different parts of it, but I remember we were still designing things up until the third day after the opening ceremonies. We were still designing and making things. It was that crazy. I mean, it was, the whole thing was crazy. We were working 7 days a week. Right after we did the style guide, I remember I was still at the office, Session Prasia office, when I did that. So that was fall '83. Oh, by Christmas '83. So this was the Olympics starts in July or August. So it's only 7 or 8 months before the Olympics. They move us to a temporary facility in downtown LA on 8th Street. And it was a big warehouse building, and we moved in there with just doors and sawhorses for tables, and we had as many designers and architects that we could fit in there. So we had probably about 300 people working in that building. And so this is just the last 7 or 8 months. It was the only time we were all together finally, and still couldn't fit everybody. There were a few people that still worked at their own offices and just came in for meetings. But we were working so hard that we were there 7 days a week, and they brought in lunch and dinner for everybody. And we just had to be, come in as early as you can and stay as late as you can, and come in. I mean, once in a while you take one day off or something, but it was insane. I mean, we needed everybody. We needed everybody to put in every hour that they could. It was like a race. So I don't think there really was a defining moment to celebrate. I don't remember that. It was always just like the sense of urgency every moment.
How about getting out of the office? Can you talk about when you maybe went to one of the events and you saw what you had done on paper and then it was on the grander scale?
Well, surprisingly, because my job was supervising all these other designers and designing stuff myself, and there were some pictures of me working on just literally putting paper on models and things like that. And I did much hands-on work as I could. I really rarely went out to any of the sites. See, there were other people on the team, mostly architects, who their job was to actually go out into the field and check on things and that type of thing. So I actually didn't see that much until the actual games. And the rumor was, we were told through the entire thing, no one's getting tickets to the event. No one. No free tickets for anybody. So I already booked, I had decided I was going to go to Europe for 2 months as soon as this job was over. I was leaving like 3 or 4 days after the Olympic opening ceremonies. And I was going to be gone for maybe 2 months. And just out of pure exhaustion, I just wanted to get away. So I already had my tickets purchased and everything. And then just about a week before the opening ceremonies, I find out I'm getting an infinity pass, which lets me into every single venue. I can go anywhere I want. I can go to any village. I can go backstage. I can do anything. It was only I think 4 of us got this pass in the Sussman Prasia office. So I was really annoyed because I did take advantage of it those first 3 days. I went to the opening ceremonies and I went to as many venues as I could visit those first 3 days, and then I was on a plane to Europe. And then the rest of it I just saw on TV once in a while. So I really didn't see much of it even on television until I got back and I saw video recordings that some friends had made of this and that. So, and it wasn't, even though videos were easily accessible, it's not like you could buy a set of videos at that time. It was really only homemade videos that people had made. So I didn't really get to see that much of it in reality.
The Olympics are coming back to LA. Do you have any thoughts or feelings on that?
I think that's very exciting. I'll be very, very interested to see what they do with the design of that. I mean, I hope there's maybe there'll be some nod to how we did it, with the temporary materials. And I can only imagine I don't know that much about what the plans are for it, but assuming that the venues are also spread out again, being a spread out city.
With the new technologies and options, if you were working on 2028, what would you be excited about getting a chance to do?
Well, being able to do everything on the computer. Obviously, we didn't have computers then at all. And so, not that computers didn't exist, but not for graphic design. And so we didn't even have a photocopy machine at the time. I would see that there would be so many advantages to designing it now, on the computer, and that systems could be set up. I mean, I think it could be a more sophisticated version of the graphics. Because imagine we were literally using strips of paper and colored pencils to do our sketches, and then even the actual real things, everything had to be cut out, by hand or with a machine. I remember we were using vinyl lettering that was computer generated, that was like brand new at the time. So I know we were definitely trying to use the latest technology, but even things like vinyl graphics were just breaking the market at that point. And the spacing was really bad, and it was very crude. for them to even be able to get the font we wanted and things like that. So I would think that they're going to blow us out of the water with whatever they do, in 2028. But, hopefully there'll be maybe some tie-in there. They'll probably want to do something completely different, but.
How do you think working on the '84 Olympics affected the rest of your career?
Oh, well, it definitely made me. I've
Pause
definitely.
for a second, get the siren out. Sorry. There's other things I can EQ out, but the siren, no. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Well, it was a fantastic experience for me to have at such an early part of my career. I think that, first of all, just having that on my resume alone and being not only, working on one or two pieces, but I worked on hundreds and hundreds of pieces. It was a great feather in my cap for my, my portfolio. And also I learned so much. I'd never worked on a three-dimensional environmental type project like that before, obviously right out of college. And I mean, no one on the team had ever worked on anything of that scale. It's a once in a lifetime thing, I think. I doubt that I'll be working on the 2028 Olympics, so it is kind of a once in a lifetime chance. And I also had to jump into management, as I'd mentioned before, at such an early part of my career. Managing such huge teams, that's something that became very much a part of my career. I mean, I went on to be a creative director at 2 internet companies. I was managing 25 to 35 people. I worked at a publishing company. Also there, I managed, 12 to 20 people at a time. So I've always been good at the management aspect of design and being able to be a good leader and to let people express their talents, utilize their talents, but also give them direction and kind of cohesiveness, especially when you're working on a big project. There are many different parts of it, and you don't really, from an efficiency standpoint, you can't let everybody have input, into where it's all going. So I basically divide up the project and figure out who's doing what and what all the pieces were, what the deadlines are, what the steps are, so people wouldn't flounder around. And I'm also because of that being so urgent, I think I've always brought that efficiency into my work. So although I believe in exploring sketches and ideas, I also don't want to waste a lot of time doing minute variations and things like that. I'm kind of impatient in that way. So, I learned a lot from that experience. And also collaborating. It's something I've always been a big fan of, collaborating with other designers and architects and different types of, interior designers, that kind of thing. So as I went through my career, I was always very easy to work with on teams, believe in the team collaboration. I'm not the type, although now I work alone most of the time, this is really the first time in my career I've worked alone. Although I'm enjoying it quite a lot, doing more of the hands-on work and less management. And I want to have that experience as well. But I think that collaboration is not something that everybody's good at or open-minded about. Some designers are very much, one-person operations because they want to be in complete control of the design, and you have to be able to kind of let some of that go when you're working in a team format. Especially the teams are huge in architectural projects. So one person can't have too big of an ego. You have to kind of let the ego thing go, and also be able to embrace other people's ideas if they have a better idea. Just be open-minded about it. So it's taught me to be a team player and very open to kind of the direction that the project's going to go. What would be the best for the project, not who's the most famous person on the team and we're only going to go with their ideas or that kind of a thing.
Can you just run through and list some of the names that to you are kind of the '84 Olympics from a design perspective?
Well, certainly Robert Miles Runyon designed the logo. Keith Bright did the pictograms. So they were on the board before us. And then, the John Jurdy and David Meckel, they would be the two leads on the architectural side. So they were very important. The as far as some of the graphic designers in our office, let's see, we had Michael Russell, Susan Hancock, Scott Kyler, Stephen Silvestri. I can't remember everybody without a list, but I just remember there were, we probably had over 55 or 60 people, at the peak when we were at the 8th Street office. And we hired a lot of people that were right out of college, or, so there were just a lot of great people involved. And as far as outside, I mean, of course, April Greiman and some of the other people that did posters were also really important. Arnold Schwartzman, he did the print graphics. There were just a lot of great people that were involved.
Do you have anything else you want to ask?
No, I think that was great.
That's great, yeah. The reason I asked you about the names is because I was thinking we could get something together, which is listing a whole bunch of names and throwing a nice little teaser. So we've been talking about what kind of teasers.
Oh, well, I can give you the list. I have the list. I have a list of the. Well, this is actually the essential credits that you want to know.
Oh, okay.
But I could highlight people who I think would be who had more.
Yeah.
Who did more. There's certainly people on here that were just got on board like in the last 6 months, so they're not as key to the look and things like that. And there were people that were, more instrumental. Terry Grabowski from Beck and Grabowski, and there's just, there were definitely key people that had, who did more work than others.
More impactful.
Just either because they were brought on early on, so they had the chance to do that. Some people that got credit maybe were just there for the last few months or just more in the production area. Not that, that wasn't important too. I actually personally had to approve over 3,000 blueprints.
Wow.
We had a whole drafting department. So the people who were better at the production end, they would be doing all the drawings and the specs and things like that. And then me and Mark Nelson, who's one of the Sussman Fraser people, we would have to go over every single one. He'd be checking all the dimensions and the technical stuff, and then I'd be checking the graphics to make sure it followed the look and feel of the style guide. Because sometimes people would get, they just wouldn't know, just spacing and sizing and things like that. Well, that was easy.
Yep.
There were more questions, but
Is there anything that
We missed that you
We
want to talk
missed.
about, or any questions we should have asked? Did you feel any resistance? I've heard people talking about some certain sexism that existed within this. Is that anything you want to
Sexism.
Tony had mentioned that she didn't think Debra had been given the proper amount of credit for getting the job then, that there was some, and this was from Tony, that there had been, I guess some of the other people, I don't know, it was Keith Bride or other people that were working at that time were just surprised, I think, that Debra's office was able to get
boo-hoo
things
to
hired.
them. Well, I think that there were definitely, I don't know all the details, and I hate to say anything negative about anybody, but especially on camera. But there was definitely some envy or jealousy or whatever in the beginning because, like I said, there were all these different teams. So let's just say I don't even remember who all the teams were. I just remember John Follis for some reason, but I would say most of the powerful designers at the time, the big names, would have been on a team with a different architect, and so everybody was kind of vying for. Everybody wanted their piece of the action or the piece of the work. They wanted it was more of a money and ego thing, I think. But because our look got selected, because we had a really strong idea and we had a strong team. I mean, Debra was a strong person and John Dirty was a strong personality as well. So I think that, I can only imagine that some of the other architectural teams were trying to also take over, because it was just clear it wasn't going to get done in time. They were going to have nothing if they didn't let somebody be in charge. And you just can't have, 23 different teams all kind of working at their own pace. So, and also it just wasn't going to be cost effective, it wasn't going to be cohesive from an image standpoint, et cetera, et cetera. There was just a million reasons why it wasn't going to work the way they were doing it. So somebody had to be in charge, and Debra had a lot of energy and a lot of spunk for somebody only 5 foot tall and about 90 pounds. And I didn't look at myself as a woman designer. I just looked at myself as a designer. And I think Debra, she had to climb up that ladder like way before that came along. So I think it really, we got the job because we merited it, and it had nothing to do with being a woman or not a woman. And I'm sure that some of those men who were powerful designers at the time, there was probably some jealousy. And also, we had a lot of criticism, like I said, that they didn't think they didn't think the colors were dignified, and our approach and the whole festival idea wasn't dignified enough. But yet it was very fun, and it was very recognizable and very memorable, and I think that we did a really good job with it. But how we worked around that was that once we did get in charge, Debra was very, very much in favor of bringing in as many designers as possible into the mix, and giving off parts of the project for people, as long as they stuck with this look and color palette. And so I don't think we were trying to just hoard the project for ourselves. It was more just trying to get it under control.
I'm happy. You happy?
Yeah.
You happy?
Okay.
Okay.